and gentlemen, welcome back to episode 45 of No One Asked Us with the always great Josh Lehr. Josh is the founder of Lehrjet LLC, a Lincoln, Nebraska consulting firm that helps mortgage lenders and fintechs with partnership strategy, business development, and M&A. Before hanging his own shingle, Josh was senior director of partnerships and industry technology at Total Expert, where he built and launched their consumer direct platform. Work that landed him on Housing Wire's 2021 Insiders list. Before that, he ran industry development at MoreTech, a Zillow Group company, working with some of the nation's biggest online lenders. Nearly 2 decades in financial services, 9+ in mortgage tech, and a University of Nebraska alum. Please welcome Josh Lehr. Josh, thanks for being on, man. Appreciate it.
Yeah,
You're also the founder of Jetyze, which we will talk about here in a moment.
Yeah.
Which
so I will correct you on this. So not the last name pronunciation, but it's Jetyze.
It's Jetyze. Okay. There you
Here's
go.
the way to remember it. Like I've been trying to tell, and this was a bad word morph on my side apparently, but the way to remember it is it's jet with E, connect with purpose. So Jetyze.
All right, there you go. And we'll get into that one. So Josh, thanks. Where are you calling in from, Josh? Are you in Nebraska right now?
Yeah, I'm still in Lincoln, Nebraska right now, but it's a crazy travel week, honestly. We've got LeadsCon, which is coming up later this week, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday in Vegas. And then behind me, I have Omni Barton Creek. I figured it was very festive with Housing Wire The Gathering happening next week. So
Yeah.
I have a nice little festive background.
Are you headed to the gathering?
Yep, I'll be down at the gathering as well. So
Okay.
It's become one of my favorite conferences, honestly.
You know, I went last year. I absolutely loved it. It was great. I should have jumped in and bought their early bird ticket a year ago, but you know, I'm a startup and I was like, I'll kick that can. And now that can is way more expensive than I can afford today. So I will I'll be not at the gathering this time. PK, you going to the gathering?
I am not.
Startup.
Maybe next year.
All right, Josh, we always joke on here. Nobody as a little kid is like, I want to grow up and be in mortgage tech. So how does a kid from Lincoln, Nebraska end up in mortgage tech?
Gosh. Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, if you look back, like I'm going back to grade school days, like I think entrepreneur was always on the card for me in the future. I was telling somebody about this the other day. Like we were sitting there in elementary school and we're like, gosh, there's all these great, X-Men comic books, these other comic books. Why don't we have our own comic book company, right? So like we drafted like a contract between a few of us and wrote a couple comic books. But it was interesting. Like I've always wanted to own my own company. I built my own websites in middle school. Went to college for management information systems, really wanting to get into something that kind of merged business and technology together. And that was really the best fit for me. Through college, I owned my own company building websites. It was more on the fun side, though. I built them for local bars and bands. It was a good little weekend gig, gave me a reason to go out and see some live music. And then, through school, I actually worked for a credit card issuer on the technology side, doing development, hardware and software. But eventually I got to the point where I grew into being their first developer, grew into product management, and then I had a buddy that reached out to me. He's a developer at a company called MoreTech, which is a product and pricing engine, which they focus strictly, majority on online lending, also helping banks and credit unions. But he said, hey, I work in mortgage, we do product and pricing, and here's what we do. We work with Zillow. And I'm like, okay. And I didn't really understand it at that point. I was still renting an apartment. I like to joke that home buying is really, mortgage 101. You kind of understand the process once you walk through it. So not only did I make the decision to get and, jump into this mortgage industry, but I bought a house at the same time, walking through, buying that home, understanding what points were, understanding where they were going to sell my mortgage. And then, it's kind of that foundational layer for me to actually get into that job of the pricing engine. And it's one of those things, once you get in, you can't get out. You want more of it. I mean, it was more tech to start, but then they got acquired by Zillow like 6 months into me being at more tech, and I was kind of freaking out as a kid. You know what I mean? I'm young. I just got this new job. I'm like, oh my gosh, they got acquired. What does this mean for me? And it was great. I worked with a lot of the exec team at Zillow in those early years. I think there was only 400 employees when we got acquired.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was a ton of fun. We got a lot of access to, I did a lot of industry coverage for the mortgage vertical specifically.
Mhm.
So understanding who the up and coming point of sales were, what other technologies would be additive to not only the MoreTech ecosystem, but also the Zillow ecosystem.
Mhm.
What was the strategy behind build, buy, partner to, get more value to our customers when it relates to mortgage. I think the biggest point that that grew into was the Mortgage Lenders of America acquisition in 2017. It was fun being a part of that team and actually acquiring what is now known as Zillow Home Loans. So able to do that, and through that industry coverage, I ran into Total Expert. After running into Total Expert, I was like, Jeff, Joe, and Sue and that team, just rock stars, right? In terms of what they were doing. And you could see the rocket ship they were building. And Zillow was great. Love Zillow. But, Jeff, he's like, hey, do you want to come, build something new with us? And, it got me excited to go kind of, more entrepreneurial, right? And feel smaller company to go grow that, which led me to Total Expert. And then, gosh, just last summer, we talked about the gathering, right? Last summer was when I actually peeled away from Total Expert. I actually still work with them quite a bit, but I wanted to go, leading back to that entrepreneurial kid, right? I wanted to go build something on my own. And I said, if I don't do something now, when am I going to do it? So this was kind of the perfect opportunity for me to say, hey, I can go consult for a while, maybe play with some software and figure out what this is really going to look like for me in the next 3 to 5 years.
Awesome. I love it. Working at Total Expert when you did, I feel like it's like working for it's like getting a spot on the 98 Yankees or something. Like that was like such just a star-studded crew over there. And then you left, and clearly Sue decided she just couldn't continue on. I'm kidding. So can we talk a little bit about, we'll come back to Learjet, but can we talk a little bit about Jetyze? Because I love it. I don't know how many people are even aware of it. I was fortunate enough. I got a ticket to the Mismo Spring event for free, thanks to Jetyze. Josh, here's I don't know that I've disclosed this to some people, but I don't know that I told you. Is Claude actually did all of my picks for me. And it had me in third place going into the finals. And I was like, man, Claude did an amazing job here. And then I ended up in seventh, but I still won something. So tell everybody who's watching, what is Jetyze and what are you looking to accomplish with it?
Yeah. So it's interesting. So when I left Total Expert, one of the first things I looked at was what conferences do I need to attend to make myself successful in the future? And part of that was looking at not only the retail division of mortgage companies, but really that online lending and lead gen, which is where I came from with Zillow. I said, I want to go to Lending Tree Conference, right? It's a great conference if you've never been. It's probably about 100 to 150 individuals, lots of great demos, lots of good content. And I looked at the dates, and it happened to be the same time as the Total Expert Conference, which I was already committed to going to. I was like, gosh, why is there not a centralized platform for us to understand across these 50 organizers and let's call it 90 to 110 events per year in mortgage, so that we can actually plan better going into those conferences, execute while we're on site, and really get follow-up and get ROI out of these conferences at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm.
And, with my time at, MoreTech and Zillow and Total Expert, there's a lot of systems people put in place to be able to do these types of things, but there's nothing that's out there to really help the common, the regular person that's going to maybe attend 2 or 3 conferences per year.
Yeah.
And I think I started playing a little bit with the code and building some things out with some of these new AI tools, right? I got to thank Josh Friend, if you guys know Josh.
Oh yeah,
he's a YouTube, but he introduced me to some things, and we started building out. I started building out this platform, and it was kind of for fun at first, right? It's how do we pull these conferences together? So not only from a user standpoint, you can understand what's out there, but you can understand what's valuable to others. So I can start to see who's going to which events ahead of time. And I can see, based off of who's a part of the network, which of my peers are going, which ones might be interesting for me to go to as well. And it really leads into the organizational aspect of it as well. So like if I'm an organizer and I'm going to throw a conference for, let's say, compliance based, right? Can I look and see what other compliance based conferences are out there that I shouldn't be planning over, right? So not having competing audiences at the same time. That was really the initial concept, and it was something, self-admittedly maybe not the best product decision, but I built it behind closed doors for quite a while. And then I think Andrew, you and I, we were at the Mortgage Bar Camp, and I kind of showed and talked about it a little bit there. And it was one of those things. I think it kind of grew attract. People were like, "This is something that's actually really cool. You should release it." And that really led to the release process, which over the last 4 months we've been slowly getting it to market, building some of the marketing. And I mean, the hope is that, let's say 5 years down the road, this app is something that happens to be the centralized events platform. Instead of, downloading 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 different apps and, not having this continuity flow between different shows to understand when you met with somebody last or, who you've connected with in the past, you have this one app to kind of rule them all, per se, right? That gives you that continuity on your conference and your travel. There's some other things that we're building into it too that are kind of fun just for day-to-day use, but the main focus was always conferences. And I'll say generally it was kind of a surprise that this launched the way that it did. I didn't think there'd be an idea for a software company right away, but it's something that we've been able to go out and deliver, and there's people seeing value out of it. So I'm super excited.
Oh yeah, no, I think it's great. I have a request for a feature. So
Okay.
there's something that does not exist in the mortgage industry that PK, you probably know this. If you go to any startup conferences, right? They have this, it's at least all the ones that I've been to, where there is a interface to where you can sign up to basically agree. It's almost like speed dating. It's like speed meetings. And you can book meetings with people. So people will like put their calendar, like their availability on it. And then you can go in and you can book 15 minutes with with whomever, right? And so it's like, it's not a lot of time, but it's so funny because I went to a conference. This is down in Indy last year. And I signed up for it a week before, and I ended up taking 23 meetings in 2 days. And it was absolutely phenomenal because it was so easy and you didn't have to play that like cold email game and like praying to God that your SDR could like get you a meeting with the one person you just wanted them to know you existed. Like all you need is 15 minutes with them. So anyways,
I was gonna say, when it comes to the conference stuff, like half the battle is like, hey, who's going to be attending that conference, right? There's like certain conferences you have a decent idea of like the pool of people that are going to be showing up, and I guess I don't know how much the lender side thinks about it, but like I guess from the vendor side, it's like, hey, like if I'm going to go to a conference, I want to make sure there's X amount of prospects and maybe some portion of my own clients that I can meet with face to face. Typically you get that list, once you sign up for the conference and things like that. It's kind of like, it's kind of gated, but I wonder if something like this could, show, hey, these 100 lenders are going to be showing up at this event. And, that also maybe drives ticket sales for people to actually show up and actually engage. And also like the programming is also like kind of typically seen somewhat last minute, or if not, at the event, day, or kind of leading up to the event. So like I don't know, just like I'm just curious if there's like ways to like crowdsource events, crowdsource parties that are happening, dinners that you're trying to fill. I think you already have this, but like appointments, right? Like being able to like schedule appointments with people and all that kind of stuff. So something along the lines of that. Like I think the main thing I'm thinking of is like, can you say, hey, these 100 lenders are going to be there, and can you drive more ticket sales because of that?
There's some things that we're doing with a couple conferences later this year, which is super exciting. That is going to expose some of that, right, and make that available. I think one of the things that you guys kind of both, I circled around is really the calendar feature, right, and the meeting scheduling. And that's something that's really cool. Is you can tie in your Outlook calendar or your Google Calendar to it now. You can share your availability in like a very simple, whether it be like like let's call it, a Calendly, or like, I think Microsoft has their booking software. It allows you to do that and share it with people at the conference. So Andrew, I like yours. Like, hey, how can you, maybe I have like a 2-hour window I want to do speed dating in, or an hour window I want to do speed dating in, and like take these meetings. Like we can make that available pretty easily, which is pretty cool. But that's the idea. Is I think there's so many disconnected tools too that people are buying from different areas to say, what's my availability? How do I tie that to my team's availability? How do I communicate what meetings, back to my executives to understand, like, here's the meeting we're getting, here's what value we're getting out of them. Like, those are the tools we're trying to deliver in kind of this cohesive experience there. And then again, keep it focused on mortgage, right? Because that's where, that's the initial, is how do we focus it on mortgage so that mortgage professionals, whether they be lenders or they be vendors, can get value out of it and get what they want to out of it, instead of sifting through, let's call it 1,000 different conferences across 10 different verticals, right?
Oh yeah, no, it's a total pain, right? And then like understanding, like, okay, well, what, like for instance, I found that like I'm really liking the state level MBA conferences, right? Like there's just something about, I don't know why, like the few that I've been to, it's like I have found tremendous benefit, and the ROI is just much higher versus like MBA annual, right? Or something.
It was just more intimate.
But it's hard to find them. Like there's just not a place. Like where do I go to find, right? So I think I think there is no end in sight of ways you could make conferences better through the app. To the point in which I would go as far as to say, if all of the conferences would just leverage one singular platform, and I think you and I kind of talked about this briefly, but like as a company, I could manage my annual marketing spend, right? Like across, like, okay, I think you and I did talk about this, where it was like, I'm like, okay, I want to spend $25,000 this year. I want to go to 5 conferences. I want to sponsor 3. I want one speaking spot. Like, what's the most efficient manner for me to do that this year, right? Like having those like insights, because it's the information is so scattered. It's so difficult to like get a read on it. And unless you talk to a person who knows about it, it's like you may just completely space by, that particular event.
Yeah. Well, I think that's one thing too, just being on the partnership side. There's been so many events that I've, elicited like partners to say, hey, do you guys want to sponsor this? Getting the prospectus out there, right? I think there's a spot for that too, right? Like right now within there, we do have the agendas actually baked in on a lot of the events and some of the ticketing prices. We haven't built out the annual budgeting tool, but to your point, Andrew, that's a lot of people are doing, is saying, hey, what shows are out there this year? How much are we going to spend? Who are we going to send to these shows, right? How do we know that we got our value out of them? Like that's what that's what people want to do. They want to understand, what am I going to spend on travel, right? And they might swag it and just round about it. And you can do those types of things, but there's just not the tools to do it. One of the things you talk about Claude Code, and I don't want to transition too much yet, but like you talk about Claude Code, I think Claude Code is like V2 of Excel, right? Let's call it V2 of Excel. Think about all the things that people do in Excel right now, right? Like I might do my annual budget planning for shows where I have a spreadsheet that shows, here's all the shows I'm going to, here's going to go to these shows, here's how much registration costs are, here's how sponsorship costs are, right? You're doing all of these things. But I think what Claude Code does for a lot of these companies is it gives them access to build these internal tools, or it gives, people like me the ability to accelerate these more enterprise tools and build out what you do in Excel into true use cases. So, yeah.
Yeah, no, that's a perfect way to put it. I don't know why you would use Excel anymore. I'm just being,
a lot of people.
Yeah, I know, but like,
not everybody is, I think, like figured out the off ramp. Let's say that.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, it is the meme, right? Which is like, just remember that 7 billion people don't use AI, right? And like, I mean, I had lunch today with a friend who's very tech forward, who I would say is probably ahead when it comes to AI, and they've never used Claude Code. Like they didn't know anything about it. And when I started breaking it down for them, they were like, oh my God, like they're like, oh, why am I not using that? Right. So I do think, to your point, PK, there are a lot of things that you can do that people just don't realize you can do, because it does take effort, right? Like PK and Chris brought me over to the Claude dark side. And it is a dark side. No, it is, because my laptop is open until like 9 o'clock every night now. Because I'm like, oh, I'm gonna do this and this and this. And I've got like 17 things going, and then I can't fall asleep because I'm like, shit, I could build this. Like I like when I run out of tokens because I feel like I can stop working. Like I feel like I'm okay. I'm okay with it. But I have a severe problem, as PK knows.
It's funny. It's the worst enemy if you have ADHD. You're just gonna keep
right,
opening.
but you still need to understand. It's still just a tool, right? And you still have to have the background in order to like use that tool properly, right? And I think that's also the big thing. You can't just with no knowledge base whatsoever go vibe code Jetyze, right? As now, can you vibe code it with an architectural background and an understanding of product? Yeah, probably. I'm
slots together.
I'm banking that a large portion of the code is vibe coded, right, Josh? Or
yeah, that's where a lot of it starts, right? I mean, it's easy, and that's what's great is you can get proof of concepts out very quickly, test them, and then actually make them production ready, enterprise ready. And I think that's the biggest thing. I don't know. I think I'm in a great position for that because, like I said, if you go back to like why I went to school, it's like I wasn't full tech and I wasn't full business. I was somewhere in between with management information systems. I think that product-minded person that has a somewhat of a tech background is that right person to go do something like this. I think it's going to change this. This leads up to a whole nother conversation, which I've had with other people, is what does it look like for the future of technology workers, right? Like, what do your teams look like for some of these startups, right? Like, if you can go start a company with an architect, with a product manager, and let's call it, a couple operations people, like, first of all, I think you're going to see an explosion of smaller tech solutions, right? You're not, that can go compete. But I'm curious as to what that person looks like, and who's going to be. What does that team structure look like in the future? You know what I mean? Because you're not going to need. I don't think you'll need junior developers. Like I don't need a junior developer. I have an architect, right, that goes and does everything, implements everything for me. And I'm the product guy, right? Now we lack marketing, we lack sales, we lack some operations, but those are things that can come later. We can go launch a product pretty quickly on our own, right, and have it be a full cohesive product.
I think what is that? So who is that person? And I've thought about this a lot because I have a 16-year-old and a 13-year-old. And so I just naturally I think about, where do they kind of need to be? And I would argue that at the speed at which we're seeing things moving, I don't know. I think it's only a question of time in which the architecture, the security, those components that you really need to deeply understand right now no longer need to be understood. I think that we'll get to a point of where you've got an agent or you've got a skill or whatever that you can deploy that takes care of all of those components, and you no longer. And so I think what that person looks like, to your point, is someone who can solve problems. I think it's someone who has a business and engineering mind, who can go into an organization, who can communicate with the people on that team to extract out of them, like, what are their problems, right? And problems are never going away, right? Like, that's the other thing. Like, there's a paper that was written on this that, like, it broke down, like, how people were like, oh, well, lawyers are going out of business, or like they were talking about different industries of like how it just won't exist anymore. And I thought it was really fascinating because what they did was I think they took the lawyer as an example, and they kept injecting AI at different points, and all the AI injection did was created new problems. Right? Because it's like, well, now you don't have to file the dockets or whatever. So now that's 10 hours back of time that you're spending in front of clients, which then require, right? It was like one of these things where it was like every advancement just made you do more anyways, which then naturally created another, opportunity for a problem to be solved. So anyways, sorry. I think that's what the person ends up looking like. What do you think, PK?
I still think you need to have like that background like Josh has, for example, of like that technical background. I don't think you can get away with that if you are trying to, you like security, for example. Like even in like the last couple of weeks, I don't know, Josh, if you've been paying attention, but like there's been so many supply chain attacks across the board, and people backdooring their way through like OAuth, system gaps and things like that. And it's kind of mind-boggling the number of like cybersecurity issues that have happened in like in the last even month. Like every time I log into Twitter, there's a new one, and it's like, oh shit. So it's like I still think that there are certain fundamentals that you need to be aware of, and like how do you like what are the best practices. And sure, like you can have Claude, you can maybe spin up an agent that its only job is to like cover your ass when it comes to security things. But I still think you yourself need to know what those things are. Like yesterday I was going back and forth with Claude on a marketing task, and it made this certain assumption, and I caught it. I'm like, well, it just made a very bold statement. I'm like, that's not true. Like it can be this or it could be that. And then like that changes the entire answer it gives. And so it's like, if I didn't correct it, it would have just went with that assumption. And it doesn't know any better. And so I still think you need to have like that domain expertise, both from a technical perspective and like a business perspective. So I think like Andrew, in your situation, for example, let's say you're the business guy and Tim is the technical guy. Like, I still think you need the marriage of both. And I think you can get pretty far without it, but like, I still think you need it.
Yeah, but I think when I look at the leaps of where the models have come in the last 2 years, right? And I look at that and then I go, okay, let's span out 5 years from now. Just 5. That's all I'm looking at. And I'm asking myself, like, what do those pieces look like? And it's so funny because you said the phrase that I hear from a lot of people, right? Which is they're like, well, we'll always have to know this, right? Well, like, you don't know how to churn butter, like, because you can buy butter at the grocery store, right? You don't need to do that anymore, right?
You
like
caught me.
You probably can't drive a stick shift, right?
I can't.
Because you can't, right? Because you don't need to, because it's rare that they make a car with a stick shift anymore, right? So
I said I can on that one.
Oh, you can. Sorry, my bad. I think it's just the natural evolution of a time in which skills are forgotten because those skills are no longer needed, right? So I think what it is more than anything else is being curious and paying attention and really looking for like, okay, what skills are important? Like I've said this a whole bunch, which is communication is absolutely critical, particularly when you're working with AI, right? Because like if you're not communicating well, I mean, you made that joke in our text chain where it was like, the new leadership skill is how well can you talk to an AI agent, right? Because really, ultimately, you're spinning up dozens of interns, and can you communicate? And then I think the other thing is going to be relationships, and is going to be that in person, like, are you relatable? Because I think the more technology we inject, the more humans will want that human interaction, connection, right?
Yeah.
It's like the old trope they always say of like, computers play chess better than any human. nobody watches computers play chess, but we do watch humans play chess, right? Like there's something just about the like human experience that I think naturally happens there.
Yeah, I think the churning the butter example is fair, but I think the time horizon matters. And so let's see.
Yeah,
Let's see in
no,
5 years.
I don't know, but like, so Josh, this came up last week with Brooke because she was like worried like about how like I was joking like, why does an underwriter need to know how to calculate income if the machine can calculate the income perfectly every single time? Like, there's just no reason.
It's super interesting. I mean, there's going to have to be some knowledge, right? To your point, you don't, me and PK don't know how to churn butter. I'm guessing you don't know either. But you talk about these, there's companies that make butter, right? It's still a necessity and it's become a commodity, right? Like I can go out and I can choose butter off the shelf and I can take it and I can, I still eat butter, right? I just don't churn it myself. What does that turn into for some of these utilities that are part of the process, right? Do some of these utilities almost get commoditized, right? Like, you talk about, I mean, I want to, that's probably too broad, but let's talk about income calculation, right? Like if I go build this income calculator and I know an income calculator can do the job, is that just strictly with the general machine, or are there companies that I just plug in for income calculation as a part of the process, right? And it's just I pick one off the shelf because I know these are 5 trusted ones and it's based off of cost potentially that I'm doing these things, right? Or particular taste or relationship that I have. It becomes, I find it to be super interesting. I've never heard that, phrased that way, but I think it becomes interesting to see how pieces of the process get pulled away and how those get treated in the future. Because to your point, not everybody's going to have to know those things, but if I have 5 trusted sources that are SOC 2 compliant that can go do this for me and I can pull it off the shelf and build it into my process, are there things that get commoditized in that way?
Possibly.
Yeah, I don't know. It'll be fascinating to see, right? Because like I'm trying to look at like where are all of these things sort of moving, right? And I think we all agree Claude has been in front of everybody else, at least lately. I don't know what they're doing. I don't know what the hell they're doing over there, but I swear to God, I'm getting a little bit tired of how often they relaunch. I've got like 3 new versions in one day. You know what I mean? And if anybody from Anthropic ever watches this, for crying out loud, Claude Design, can we unlock the fucking tokens on it? But I see like you're seeing like open source skills, and this is a perfect example, right? Which is, some skills in the marketplaces are better than other skills, and they're all dependent on the person who built that skill. Right. And so I can see a world in which people are hyper specialized and they're building skills that others can leverage the machine to then use that skill, because again, they don't need to know how to do that particular thing, right? They don't have to know that part of the process because they have that dependable thing. And maybe I don't know, maybe that's, but then you have to ask yourself, like, once the skill becomes understood, like, then it's, you can't like copyright the skill or anything of that nature, right? So everything ends up being open sourced. But I still live in the optimist. I'm in the Star Trek camp, right? So if we want to go like even further out, like I am a firm believer that everything basically becomes free and there's no cost for anything. Well, if you think about it, that's where this should go, right? Because now you get robots. The robots start building everything. The robots are the one mining the materials. Like eventually it just gets into this loop, right? Of where anything can be produced for nothing because it's all done by the robots.
I think the flaw there is that you're maybe assuming that human desire stays still and doesn't change.
Say more.
Like you're always going to want more things, more unique things. You're going to want things that give you a different status than the next person over. there's like multiple, there's like a BMW and there's a Toyota, and you're going to be like, oh, I want a Rolls Royce. I want to be different from everybody else. I want something that's nicer than everybody else has. Maybe you're going to have all the robots, but then you're going to be like, no, I want my shit handmade. I want my shit hand sewn. I want my stuff to have none of that vegan leather that's in that Tesla. I want it to be like a real car.
So you think there's a world in which me hand sewing suits will be a luxury that people will pay like top dollar for?
That shit happens today. People go to like Savile Row.
Right? Yeah. I get where you're going.
Like, even if the Hugo Boss one that came off the manufacturing line might be a better fitting thing or made to measure, you're still gonna want the hand sewn one where the guy is like poking you with all the needles and, you know, making sure the suit fits right and like all that kind of stuff, you know? So
yeah. Well, I think, you know, I still think, I mean, you talk about AI and mortgage, right? Something relatable to kind of where we're at is, I think it's the same. Like, you talk about where AI is going and the ability to automate mortgages. I mean, something different, not on the, like, let's call it the class scale, right? But like, I always want that human touch. I think, to your point, human touch is maybe the differentiator there. Is I want someone human to manage my mortgage instead of a computer, right? And it's probably going to cost me more. So from a class differential, like, I want that person that's relatable, that's going to buy a home, even though the machine might know the answers. But that becomes a concierge product that maybe is more expensive in the future, right? Because let's be real, eventually there's going to be someone that originates a mortgage, probably through an AI agent, right? That's going to happen. But they're always good. Like, if you look at the studies going back a decade, this goes back to, you know, the whole human touch. I remember the first Zillow trend study that came out, home trend study. 67% of people wanted to have a trusted advisor along with them for the ride to understand what they should do from a home buying, home selling process. And that number's not changed. I think it's increased, if anything, over time, because people need that trusted person, because they're only doing this a handful of times. So even if we can automate the AI aspects of a mortgage, like, you're still going to have that concierge that is the personal touch. More on the consumables. One of the things you talked about, PK, the Rolls Royce. It's like, well, if I can get everything produced, why don't I have my own flying car, my own? You know what I mean? Like, what is that next thing? I like the idea, Andrew, of everything being free, right? But it's like,
well, that's sort of the idea in Star Trek, right? Like, they never really talk about this or dive into it, but I think the general premise is supposed to be that it is a world in which there is no longer, like, all needs are met. Right. And so it's you're allowed to pursue whatever is your true passion. Right. Isn't that ultimately kind of the idea behind Star Trek? PK, have you ever watched Star Trek? I'm just realizing now that PK
I know what it is, but I haven't watched it.
Yeah. So, I mean, the general premise is that it's, you know, as far as humanity is concerned, you know, everyone on Earth is effectively one nation. And there's, you know, complete and total peace. And again, there's no wanting for anything, right? Because homes don't cost money. Cars don't cost money. Food doesn't cost money, right? None of these things cost anything. So now, as a result, the humanity is much more focused on learning and on their passions. Right. And how they pursue those, because materials no longer have a cost associated to them. It's an interesting philosophical debate, though.
Yeah.
Which is like, to your point, PK, is that, you know, they call it like the caveman gene, like that constant need for more and more resources. Right. That's really where it comes from, is, you know, early humanity. You know, we were constantly worried about when, you know, where do we find the next resources, right? So it's just naturally built into us to
status seeking.
It's not, I don't think it's status seeking as much as it is resource seeking, right? So it's like, so if you think about it, like, a caveman would find an animal and eat it, but they don't have a refrigeration, right? They don't have any way to store anything. So it was like this constant, like, I need more resources. And we forget that, like, we lived like that for the majority of, like, this species, right? Like, all this shit today is new. So does the brain, is there a psychological change over time when humanity no longer has to worry about resources?
I think we have a while to go before all of that. I don't mean to be pessimistic, but we got our work cut out for us.
But that's what I'm seeing. That's where I see it going. But real quick side question: have either of you watched the show Raised by Wolves?
No, I don't
Okay,
have TV.
Either one, I highly recommend. I don't know where you may actually have to buy it because I don't know that I don't think it's on HBO anymore. It was an HBO show. I think it had 2 seasons, and it's like way in the future. But it basically the premise of it is AI is now the government, and it's. And like the cyborgs are like, it's crazy. But it's a really interesting show because it takes that philosophical dive of what does the world look like with artificial superintelligence, like thousands of years in the future. I highly recommend it.
That sounds pretty interesting.
I'm glad that we're talking a lot about mortgage tech today.
Yeah, so let me bring it back to real quick to it's a mix of mortgage tech and what we're talking about here.
Can you bring it back to mortgage tech? All right.
This is a fun conversation though. I like it. I was gonna say the churning butter one, right? I think you guys both have seen this at this point, which is like, even though there's at the end of the day, like, let's say there's inputs and there's outputs. The output being a closed mortgage that is eventually sold to Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, etc. How we get there, we can call it churning the butter, but like everybody churns butters like 500 different ways in every single part of the process, and so it's like there's so much like variation that happens in that call it manufacturing process. So like I think there's like some challenges there that we're all gonna have to kind of figure out. Because I've yet to come across 2 lenders that operate exactly the same way.
No, but and it's interesting because this is Josh. There's another part I want to kind of get in, because obviously you also have a consulting company. So in Lehrjet LLC, and so. I guess to answer the question is or not really answer the question, I guess, is I'm trying to get is I'm a little bit worried with how people are going about their AI strategy. And Josh, I'm really curious to see what you're hearing and what you're seeing. And this is what I mean by this is I think everybody I'm a big proponent of crawl, walk, run. Right? Like you shouldn't like come in and like dump all these systems like overnight onto all of your people, right? And you need to have like a thoughtful process. That being said, I'm a little bit worried that people are like, we're just going to pick a problem and we're going to go hire a company that's like, but they don't know if like, does that company only solve that one problem? Like I literally talked to somebody the other week who was hiring an AI company that does appraisals. That is all that they do is appraisals. And I was like, I don't know that that's the answer that you want on your, I'm not saying it has to be me necessarily, but I think people need to step back and look at the overall picture of their organization, because ultimately, PK, where I was going with this is every mortgage shop looks different in the middle. None of them look different at the beginning and the end. They all look different in the middle. And it's the admin tasks that look different. If you go and compare, it's really ultimately it's the admin tasks that look different from one shop to another. And so that is why I would say that for your AI strategy, I think you need to look at what is the holistic plan. I do think you need to step back and say, what is my holistic plan and what am I ultimately marching towards. Not that I'm going to do that tomorrow or next week or next month, but so that at least now I'm making some informed decisions on how I crawl before I walk. Because what I'm worried is going to happen with a lot of people is they're going to wake up in a year and they're going to have 27 AI vendors running across their ecosystem. And it is going to be a governance and compliance disaster for those organizations.
Josh, what do you think? What's your take?
Yeah, Josh, what?
It's super interesting. Like, I mean, the two most prominent use cases, I think, is pretty clear, right? Like, if it's not, it's, the underwriting use case, you see a lot of people attacking that, but then it's the voice AI, right? And like, those are the hey, these are point solutions I can go implement in my process that are potentially tied to other tools as well that I can leverage. Like, they're add-ons to those other tools. Now, when you get the broader question, which you guys are asking, right? I start to think about AI strategy. And the first thing I think about with AI strategy, and this has come up with a number of lenders and a number of vendors, is if you're going to have an AI strategy, what's your data strategy, right? And I think data strategy is something that people say, yeah, it's important, but it is truly like foundational for you on the AI side. And I think the problem is you have some of these retail lenders. I'll talk to some of the retail lenders, right? That have multiple CRMs. They have a couple different PPEs through acquisitions. They have a servicing platform. They have a hedging platform, and they have all this data in different areas. And they want to build, to your point, they want to build AI on top of it. They bring in an AI to kind of help them with their process. The problem is they don't have a foundational knowledge of the data that they have today, and they don't have a centralized knowledge base of that today. And that becomes a problem because your AI is only as good as the data that it sits on top of. So I have a lot of people today that are, customers, like I said, on the lender and vendor side that are saying, what is our data strategy first? Or I'm pushing them in that direction if they're not thinking about it. Because if you don't have this centralized data platform where you're able to push data to or retrieve data from, how are you looking at the future, right? Because if you're going to take advantage of AI and some of the scaling that's allowing AI to do, building your own proprietary tools, which I think is also like services as a new software, that's a whole nother topic, right? But like, if you're going to build your own tooling and your own proprietary sets here, you better have your data house in order if you want to scale it, because that's what's going to get out of whack. Is you're going to build AI solutions on all these different toolings, and you're going to have all these great data sets, but you're not going to be able to leverage the full power of the data underneath. So like when I think about AI strategy and how you adopt it, like I still go back to data and making sure that you have a data strategy before you do that. So that way you have something that is scalable in the future. And I think those that focus on data strategy are going to be able to scale faster as AI continues to advance and new age AI to come out.
We should talk later. It's kind of what we do. No, but it's interesting because that's where we sort of saw the ball bouncing, right? Was, everybody was solving for specific problems, and we sort of stepped back and we were like, wait a second, like first and foremost, how is all of the data interconnected? And I think this is going to really allow for people to start to drop systems, right? Like not as many, right? Like PK and I were talking about this earlier is, one of the project, this is sort of similar, but like one of the things for us is originally our website was built in Framer. And so I got to write a check to Framer every single month. And it's kind of dumb that I have to, right? And so I spent the weekend and I had Claude Code rebuild the entire website. Now it took a while because it's not, I know a lot of people think you can just drop one prompt and you're like good to go. So, it took a considerable amount, right, of massaging and whatnot, right? But CRMs are like another similar one that I see, which is like, now, if you actually have a central repository of understanding your knowledge as an organization, and I'm not saying it has to be us, there's others to do it. You no longer need some of the systems that you've always needed, right? So like, let's take a CRM as an example. Well, pretty much everything that exists in the CRM already exists somewhere else. So we're going to get to that point, right, of where the interface, the standardized interfaces are going to be text and email, I think, for like LOs and things of that nature. And it's the systems are going to matter less and less and less, because ultimately you're just looking at the database and you're asking questions of it, right?
I think I think the
Josh,
system.
you got it. I'll share an anecdote afterwards.
Yeah, I'm so interested because the systems, I think you're right. There's certain systems you can probably peel out, like your website, redoing your website. That's definitely one thing. I can go rebuild my website, have all the basic context that I need to. There's solvable problems that I can punch into Claude code that's going to go solve this problem. I think when it comes down to implementations around some of these things or that very proprietary knowledge, I'm curious. I think maybe not eliminating things like in the tech stack for certain things you'll be able to eliminate, I think.
Certain things will have to stay. There's no question. Yeah.
Certain things will have to stay, and they become the way they get access or the way they get leveraged will be different, right?
Yes.
I think to your point, like, what is the new interface? Everybody's always, for all 13 years I've been in this industry, it's I want the single pane of glass, so I don't have to have someone in the point of sale, the LOS, and the PPE, right? I want the single pane of glass, which I think is where we're going to. But I think even with that single pane of glass, you have these utilities that have differentiating factors that they built out that you don't want to build out. You want to own the experience, but you might, I might want to own my home cooked steak meal, but I don't want to go churn the butter for it, right? Like, I think that gets back to that analogy a little bit.
Yeah.
Like, I think those tools will always be there to leverage, to be a part of the overall, recipe of what you have for software. It's just a matter of how much work it is to use them or how you implement them within your strategy.
100%. And then I think it also just comes down to what was your AI agent strategy in the first place, and how good of a job did you do when you were organizing that data and normalizing that data across the two. But yeah, I don't know. It's definitely a fascinating time, because I feel like, like Claude has that, or Anthropic has that great ad running right now where it's like, finally move at the speed of your ideas sort of situation. And like, we even see that within our development team and our data scientist team, right? It's just the output is just so much more significant from everybody on the team, which comes back to the point of, it's a tool and it's going to make people a lot better. And I think I know there's always the job concern. I don't think it's going to end up being an issue ultimately, because I think there'll just be more problems that are uncovered. And it's much easier to start a company now than it ever has been, right? Like, I don't need, we're like, okay, do we want to, burn $3,000 a month on, Claude tokens, or go hire another engineer, right? Like, I mean, it's sort of like, I've got, to your point, PK, earlier, like, I've got the context, right? Like, I've got the knowledge in the door, and now it's just a question of the knowledge directing the agents to do the work. But I think that then allows for more and more people, right, who are like, for the product guy at Optimal Blue, or wherever, I don't know, randomly, or Encompass or whatever, who see a problem that's not being solved at the company they're at, and they go out and, them and maybe one developer and Claude code, and, they're able to spin up a company.
To that point, you put the right context around it, PK, you have that security person that can get you through a SOC 2 audit, right? And you have an enterprise tool that you can get out to market, and I'm very interested to see the growth of some of these companies and the point solutions that come out to solve problems that haven't been solved in the last decade that we've been looking to solve in that intermediate process.
Yeah, I think that'll be the biggest thing.
I was gonna say, like, in a weird or an interesting way, maybe what we'll see is, like, there's like this bundling aspect of where a lot of these PE acquisitions, M&A also has kind of like, bundled up certain solutions, and maybe there's a lot of gaps in what those solutions do, and then maybe the people on the inside are the ones to know about those gaps, and then maybe you'll see kind of like a little bit of an unbundling. They're like, hey, I'll go solve that problem, and then another person can go solve another problem, and people will create a bunch of companies around all the little gaps, and then who knows, maybe there might be another bundling that happens.
Okay, so it is that time for us. The question from the prior week. So Sue Woodard was on last week, Josh, and obviously you know Sue, and obviously you know Sue's LinkedIn PSAs about travel, which we all love and appreciate. And so she wanted to know, what is your craziest travel story?
Oof. We'll keep it PG. I mean, most of them are PG, right? I will say, just because it's LeadsCon week, right? So, like I said, this is my first time at LeadsCon in 5 years. So, the last time I went to LeadsCon was with Total Expert, and this is a fun story. So, LeadsCon is very much there's a lot of people that get the cabanas, have the private cabanas, computers set up, do demos out there. It's kind of a fun space for a meeting, especially in the spring, after everybody's been cooped up. We did a cabana meeting. We had a prime placement for a cabana, but they had them all rented out, so they had to move us to the back. Now, if you've ever been to MGM, the back of the pool area is by the Wet Republic pool, okay? We had demos in this cabana all day, and as the Wet Republic pool opened, the music kept getting louder and louder and louder, and our sales engineer, Frank Taraborelli, good guy, he's sitting there and his voice is just getting louder and louder and louder to offset the music. And we're sitting in a meeting. I remember this. It was our CRO. It was him, myself, and then a salesperson. And all of a sudden, the Wet Republic pool goes off fireworks, and you hear burr, 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 and like our CRO had to leave. She had to leave the cabana. She was laughing, dying so hard. It's one of those travel stories I will never forget. Best of intentions, greatest of stories at the end of it. So it was that was definitely a crazy travel story.
Hopefully you guys landed a client.
Okay.
Fireworks.
So next week, Josh, we have Amanda Tucker, who is the Chief Risk and Compliance Officer at Atlantic Bay Mortgage. What would you like to ask her? What do you want her to tell us?
Oh, can it be a two-part question? I mean, just based off the spirit of what we're talking about, I'd like to understand, is it Claude, ChatGPT, or is it Grok? Like, what's she using? And then what's her favorite industry specific AI tool too, especially in compliance? You know what I mean? I'd be curious on those two questions.
All right, there you go. I will ask her. I have a feeling I know that Atlantic Bay, I believe, is a Claude enterprise. Maybe not. Maybe it's an OpenAI enterprise. Now that I said it out loud, I can't keep up. It's the whole debate between the two. I've left though. I deleted my my OpenAI account last month.
Did you export your profile? I've been trying to export mine, and I don't get this. I can't get the link.
Here's what I said for people is number one, I did the export. It didn't have as much information as I expected it to have. Number one, you know what? I found that getting Claude up to speed on me was actually not as hard as I thought. I think when you get used to using the tool, at least for me, when you get used to using the tools, it was like I needed to get Claude up to date on AskBob AI. Well, I just fed it our user manual, our security and our compliance, our deck, our website. I was like, go study all this, commit it to memory. Boom, it had it. I think also building skills is a unique thing in Claude, which also helps.
They also have a prompt that you can give plug into ChatGPT, and then it'll pull.
It doesn't extract that much. That's what I was saying.
Oh, really?
Like I was kind of surprised at how little it came out. So, Josh, thank you so much for coming.
Awesome.
By the way, we didn't even talk about it, because Chris didn't even bother to show up today. I'm just kidding. Chris said he wasn't going to be able to make it. He had work. It's our 1 year anniversary, PK.
Oh
shit.
The show has been on for 1 year, which is crazy.
That's crazy.
Because it was a random weekend, Josh, where the three of us were like, we should do a show. And so like I literally threw it into GBT and had GBT build out the whole entire show. And I was like, all right, sure, let's do it. So a year
that's
later,
fucking awesome.
Still holding
congrats,
strong.
guys. That's awesome. That's
So
a huge milestone.
Thanks for being our 1 year guest there, Josh.
Yeah, thanks
Josh,
for
will
having
you
me.
be at Mismo Spring Summit by chance?
I won't make it to Mismo. My travel schedule gets pretty light after these last 2 shows. So
Gotcha. All right.
Andrew, he gave you his ticket.
Yes. Yeah, that must be someone. All right, guys. Thanks so much. Appreciate it. Thanks, everybody. See us back here next week, episode 46 with Amanda Tucker.